Hello and welcome to another episode, another edition, another jam of Design Under Influence podcast provided to you by ArchiCAD. We're an IT company for the architects, and Willard and myself are going to continue on our path to help you bring your firm into the next level by moving away from AutoCAD potentially and grabbing yourself a seat at the table with the 3D cool boys and girls, right, Willard?
Yes, sir.
ArchiCAD and Graphisoft is what we're sort of talking about today, and Willard is the expert. I'm not afraid of this word. His depth is sort of, we're not going to be able to get to anywhere near as far as he can go with this technology, but suffice it to say that we want to provide you a good overview of how to think about the transition. And today we're covering step 4, which is model reconstruction. We have created 10 steps. Willard has. I was here to interview. So he is the expert. I'm the ever curious. And in between us, hopefully we will provide the information you need to get to the next step and get successful with your firm's transition to the new technology. Now, what, Willard, I spoke a lot of words. Maybe you can give us a bit of a window into the model reconstruction and why it's important and why do it.
Yeah, so I think at this point we've gotten to one of the more important steps. I think in the last 3 steps, we talked about, evaluating your project requirements, training, and then data migration. And now we're getting into kind of reconstructing your project or your model inside of ArchiCAD and why that's important. And I think through this process, you've taken, a lot of time to get to this step. And then what I find really critical is that, you kind of jump all in. And when you decide that you and your firm are going to take a project into ArchiCAD and start running with it, there can be kind of a hesitation or a comfort level of just using kind of elements that you might have imported. So if you're bringing it in from AutoCAD or some other application, you're going to have information that's going to be translated in a way that might not be optimized for ArchiCAD's use and capabilities. And so one of the critical pieces to this is having the space and bandwidth to translate your model into native ArchiCAD elements and objects and whatnot. And the overall benefit of doing this is that you are going to be able to leverage some of the inherent tools and capabilities more natively and more fluidly within ArchiCAD. And so the way that I've seen this done in the past is, so if you have an AutoCAD file or something of that nature, and you are bringing it in as 2-dimensional line work or even potentially 3-dimensional kind of elements, what you're going to want to do is create some areas within ArchiCAD to be able to reconstruct that model. And I'm trying to think of an analogy that was similar to kind of our car analogies in terms of bringing in these models. And I would think that this would be like if you're bringing in a classic car and you wanted to put a modern engine in it, you wouldn't necessarily just bring the car in and drop the engine in and then think that it's going to perform to the level that you expect. So there's going to be some teardown and rebuilding within that process. And that process is both beneficial to the model itself the longevity and kind of fruitfulness that you're going to realize from doing this process. But it also helps you and your team better understand the capabilities within ArchiCAD. And so that's kind of a generic overview of the importance of what we're doing at this stage, as well as the benefit to you, the project, and the team itself.
What is involved? So we're talking about like resto mods, let's say 68, like Monte Carlo, something like that. You want to put a air conditioning in it. This isn't just a swap. It's you gotta pipe it in. You gotta make sure electrical is running and all the other stuff involved with that. Love the analogy. This is good, keeping us consistent. Now, what that little bit, the how of it, what's involved in reconstructing the model? Like, how do you start? How do you think about it? How do you begin? How do you choose which ones to do? Maybe kind of give us a little bit of that color.
Yeah, so I would probably kind of in the reconstruction process, probably take a project that is transitioning from one phase to another. So you are either coming out of like schematic design into design development, or doing a phase change. I think is the easier kind of aspect. And I think also which is somewhat helpful is bringing in a project that is an example of a completed kind of project and use that as kind of a marker for understanding how to get to that point. And I say that with a little bit of trepidation because there are some parts that even if you have a completed model that was done in AutoCAD or something of that nature, there are going to be some elements in there that might be a little bit more difficult to replicate. But using it as just a general marker of like, this is kind of where I want to go, both aesthetically, graphically, and then kind of in function and how the things are laid out on the sheets. Because ArchiCAD is like a parametric tool, you are now kind of jumping into not only how it looks in model space, but also how it's going to be represented on your sheets and within that. But then because of the multi-dimensional aspects of this, now you're opening the door to the ability to do analysis and things like that. So the way that I have done it in the past is I'll bring in or export a DWG or whatever file format that I'm trying to recreate, and then I'll bring that both into. So there's a location in ArchiCAD, and I use this primarily, which is called a worksheet. And so within ArchiCAD, there's this area that you can bring in drawings, and it will allow you to not affect the model in too many ways that could be potentially problematic in the future. And what I mean is that and this is like on a limited case basis, but sometimes if you bring information into kind of the model space of ArchiCAD or kind of the floor plan or something of that nature, it'll want to recreate layers or create new layers that are similar to what you brought in. And so I use this worksheet area within ArchiCAD as kind of a sandbox. And that allows me to kind of isolate the information both graphically as well as within kind of the parametric nature of ArchiCAD. So first I'll bring in a DWG, and there's a couple different ways, but you can just import it as a DWG, and then you can explode it. And so that means that it'll start to reflect what you see in AutoCAD. And then I use that as a trace reference. And so I'll go back into my modeling area and trace the information that I brought in. So, rescaling it potentially, but 99% of the time it comes in at the right scale, and then tracing it in my model view. And what that allows me to do is now I can start to pick my native elements like walls and doors and roof elements inside of my model area. And I can start to trace with a high precision the information that I want to start to reflect. And why I use the trace is because I can still snap to the elements that I brought in, but I'm not fighting with the elements in the same kind of environment, so the same space. And more specifically, what that means is if you brought information into a model area, you potentially could be fighting the line work that you brought in. And that's why I use the trace. So it gives me the same kind of opportunity to look at the information, touch it in a way that is not going to affect it, and it's not going to affect my model. So then I can really quickly go through a set of DWGs and quickly recreate that information, and using native elements and objects that are in ArchiCAD to reflect kind of the drawings that I'm referencing.
Wow. Okay. So this is basically, you just sort of went play by play, thought through the process visually without having any aids and or notes. So are you looking at notes? Be honest.
No.
That was good. So, when I said expert, I mean, so if it's too much for those of you maybe not as familiar with the program, we're here to help, right? ArchIT, we're an IT company for architects, but we'll also help with migrations, and Willard is definitely can help you shortcut the process. But I think that was excellent. That's just excellent memory recall as far as how to manipulate data in DWG, migrate it out, put it into the worksheet, and then do your adjustments there. And then does that go into the model from there, stays in worksheets? I'm not sure how that works.
No, I just use the worksheets as like a reference layer, and most of that information ideally will not go into the model itself. And I use the worksheets probably, almost exclusively for any information that I am bringing in that I need to reference that could, potentially not just be a model that I'm trying to build, but it could be like surveys or other documentation that is coming from an outside party that I want to reference or utilize, but not necessarily directly incorporate into kind of the modeling area that I'm leveraging within ArchiCAD. So it's just basically, if you were to think of it, you're overlaying a piece of trace and just sketching over that information, but with native ArchiCAD components and objects.
And so we're still talking about getting the finished project to convert, right? We're not yet talking about, or is it a similar process for a project that changing that's active project that's moving into new phase?
Yeah, this would be both for conversion, and this would be kind of a phase change as well.
Got it. So the process is the same.
Yeah.
What you're recommending is get the finished project through the steps, so the steps become familiar, right? And then move on to the active project. Is that kind of your recommendation?
Yeah. Sometimes what I'll do is I'll have both like a completed project as a reference, as well as a project that I'm trying to transition, and both have those in the kind of folder structure of the worksheets and use those as reference. Another reason why I use worksheets as well is like when I'm laying out the drawing on the layout. So what the actual published information looks like, I can again reference that completed project and lay it out on my layout. And then I can adjust, the title block or kind of the overall look of what that sheet looks like. But it's just a reference. And so it really helps streamline like the conversion process. And, in reality, I don't think I actually don't know of another application that does this sort of conversion or translation process as seamlessly as ArchiCAD. And I'm trying to think if I actually just thinking through, there's not many applications that I've seen or any application other than ArchiCAD that allows you to create kind of a sandbox area where you're working and then also have kind of a live reference of that information that you're able to snap to and trace and not pollute kind of the model that you're creating. So, in just kind of surveying other applications, there's not this. ArchiCAD makes it very easy to convert to native ArchiCAD objects much more easily than other kind of applications out there.
All right. I think that was good advice and very easy to understand, even for somebody who doesn't use this every day. That's actually kind of really, really cool. To be able to visualize this just from words, right? That's kind of cool. But people who are in it, I'm sure, will have a lot more connection with how this works. Let's round this out with the analysis simulations piece. Now that you have made that conversion, what are the advantages? Why did you go through all this, right? What are the outcomes you're looking for?
Yeah, I mean, there's a host of different advantages to doing this process, especially if you're committed to leveraging ArchiCAD, is that now with this native information, you're able to do cost estimation or quantity takeoffs very easily. You're able to do rendering that will be using both kind of the native rendering engine within ArchiCAD, and then have materials and things like that that are associated with that, so that you're having really high quality renderings after you've done this process. But then there's also the aspects of energy analysis as well as structural analysis that you wouldn't be able to do without kind of doing this conversion process. And so the time that you spend converting, recreating, and kind of leveraging ArchiCAD's native tools are going to, pay, dividends throughout the existence or the use of the project in multiple different areas that you wouldn't be able to do, in any other way.
Very cool. Okay. I think this was a good round out of the model reconstruction step in AutoCAD to ArchiCAD migration. Do you have any kind of maybe tips and tricks or words of wisdom for folks who are in this process and watching, listening, reading us right now?
Yeah, I think just the tips and tricks are, bringing the information into, I think, a isolated area is like one of the things that I've learned over my years of using ArchiCAD, is not necessarily polluting your model space with that information, because it can have effects that potentially could migrate throughout the project that could be not necessarily beneficial. And specifically what I'm getting at is that if you have layer combinations or different layers that you're using in your ArchiCAD template or plan to be using, when you bring in these other kind of artifacts, they potentially could make it a little bit more difficult to isolate those pieces of information if they are brought into the kind of the model space. And that's why I use the worksheets. And then I think another kind of component to that is if you bring them into the worksheet area, you have the option of exploding it, but you also have the option of not exploding it. And then it keeps it kind of as an isolated element, but you're still able to snap to the pieces of it. And so that's why I leverage the worksheet area almost exclusively when I'm doing these kind of operations. And then I guess the other aspect of it is when you're exploring the kind of parametric modeling aspect of it, you have a lot more freedom to explore, create information, and use the model space as your kind of jumping off point. And you're going to realize a lot more freedoms that you have and kind of starting to understand the benefits of the parametric technology and the software itself once you start to do that conversion. So it's a really rewarding process. It allows the user and the team to learn a lot about both the software as well as the building itself. So you're starting to explore the parametric nature and the richness that you can extract from these type of models. And so just jump in and don't be afraid to create, import, and mess with these models, because you're going to learn a lot and your team's going to benefit significantly from this adoption process and this conversion process.
Wonderful. GetArchIT.com is where you can find us. If we helped you out here, perhaps you need an IT help as well. We work exclusively with AAC industry. Architects is majority of our clients. We understand the challenges and we help solve them with a lot less effort, money, resources, what have you, because we specialize. And then, of course, if conversion is a flavor, AutoCAD to ArchiCAD, we can help with that as well. We got the world's best. Willard, thank you for all your time, man. I appreciate it. And next time, you guys, depending on what timeline you're in this creation of the series, our next one's going to be template creation, right? Yep. And so, everybody, thank you for watching. GetArchIT.com is where you can find us. Otherwise, hit play on YouTube or any podcast provider you use for the next section. And good luck with all of your efforts. Cheers.
Thanks, Alex.